I'm pleased to be here. Thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you, Theo, for having me. This is a good experience. I know that I've been to several of these myself, and one of the things we're going to be talking today about, or the major thing, is cultivation. And I have discovered that cultivation is probably one of the more complex pieces of this whole routine, because there's so much going on and coming from different directions. I think that you can go down a rabbit hole on any aspect of it. So what I'm going to try to do is bring out a few specific things for us to talk about, move us through the process, help you understand what that process is. I hope that we'll get some takeaways here for you. I really am hoping that you'll understand where you fit in the cycle. We're going to talk a lot about relationships and relationship building, because that's a big part of the process. We're going to talk about sales versus fundraising, which I think comes up for all of us. And we're also going to talk about building professional trust. We're going to practice, so I'm going to make you work, but you'll enjoy it. I think you'll come out of it with maybe some insights that you didn't have prior. And what I really want you to do is share it with the rest of the group, so we'll have an opportunity to talk to each other, because I think that's actually, peer mentoring is one of the best ways for us to learn. And I hope that we have some time to talk about the pitfalls and tips. So I know we all have stories about how we've screwed up and how we've recovered from that. So we're definitely going to have an opportunity to talk about that. But I wanted to make sure that no matter what you do in the aspect of the development cycle or the philanthropic cycle, that cultivation is part of what you do. So we're going to take a minute here and talk about and have you introduce yourselves to each other, and then tell us as a group what you are actually doing in the development cycle for the university and what your role is. Because I think you'll find by the end of today that no matter what you're doing here, whether you're a frontline fundraiser, I know we don't have research people here today, but if you're working special events or alumni relations, you're going to find that cultivation is also part of your job. So we'll try to get to as much detail as we can. And the first thing I want to do then is take this opportunity to have you all introduce yourselves to each other. And I'm going to show you something that I think makes a difference. And you obviously see I'm wearing my eye pin and so on and so forth. I've told you my name. But what does this do when I put this on? All of a sudden, does my relationship with you change a little bit? All of a sudden I'm representing an organization? I've sort of formalized my relationship with you and how we're interacting. So this is actually a tip. If you get into a situation where you need to be taken seriously, maybe you're feeling a little uncomfortable, maybe you need permission to enter into a conversation with somebody that you've not met before, this is a good thing to do. Pop on your name tag, because all of a sudden it changes who you are, your demeanor in interacting with somebody. So we'll try really hard to do that today. So when you stand up, I know some of you have name tags on, and of course you've had sticky ones, so that doesn't count. You're not going to wear a sticky one except at a special event maybe or something like that. But tell us who you are. So we'll start over here, and if you could stand up, please, because you are introducing yourself to someone you might be cultivating in the future. So if you could stand up and tell us who you are, what unit you're with, how long you've been here.
Hi, I'm Ross Williams. I'm with the College of Engineering, major gifts, and I've been here for 15 months.
And who's counting, right? It's funny how we do that here, right? Go ahead, keep it going.
I'm Jennifer Smith with the College of Aces. I've been here a little over a year and a half, and I'm in major gifts.
My name is Joe Madden. I work in major gifts as an assistant director of development for the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, representing the Department of Chemistry, and I've been here for just under 1 year.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Keely Ashman. I'm with Civil and Environmental Engineering, College of Engineering. I'm alumni in corporate relations, and I'm celebrating my 1-year anniversary tomorrow.
See how a milestone that is? That's great.
Audrey LeGrand. I am Assistant Director of Alumni and Student Relations and Electrical and Engineering. I have been here about 2.5 years now.
I am Tony Colonis. I have been
I know.
I represent College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, all the community-based units, and the major gift office.
My name is Trent Reed. I'm with the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences as well. I represent the life science schools, and I've been on campus for 4 months at this point.
Congratulations. Well, how you said on campus? Where were you? Another part of the university prior to that, or?
I was a grad in 2012.
Okay. Okay. So this is a new, yeah. So a new piece for you, but you're still here.
Right.
Okay, that's good. Go ahead.
I'm Chris Kirby. I'm the new regional director for the Midwest. Been here 2 months, just under 2 months.
I'm Evan Tannen. I'm a major gift officer for LAS. I've also been here 21 months, and I represent math, stats, economics, and political science.
My name is John. I've been here 4 months, Office of the Vice Chancellor, I'm a regional director covering the northeast part of the United States.
I'm David Hamilton, College of Ed Med, the Associate Director for Advancement there. I transitioned. Started out with Leadership Annual Giving. I'll be transitioning to Major Gifts over a period of time this summer. I've been with the university since 1995. However, I've been in advancement almost 3 years in July, and I represent dogs, puppies.
Oh, I just sometimes think that'd be the best, right?
Hi everyone, I'm Kathleen Knight. I'm the Assistant Director of Development with Division of Intercollegiate Athletics in our Chicago office. I have been here for about 5 months.
Hi everyone, I'm Nishant Makijani, College of Engineering, Major Gifts, the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering. Been here 15 months, started the same day as Ross.
My name is Erin Lewis. I have been here 2 months tomorrow. We're shadowing each other like everything training. I work for Illinois Public Media, which is WILL. We have pledge coming up in a couple weeks, so please support the public media.
There you go. See how she made this kind of soft sell? Actually, it was pretty direct. Go ahead.
Good morning, my name is Gail Waters. I work for the College of Engineering. I work in the advancement office, and I do marketing and communications. And I've been with the College of Engineering for about 15 months, I think, same as Ross and Nishant. And before that, I was with University of Illinois Extension for 3 years.
I'm Allison Bell. I do stewardship and government relations for the College of Engineering, and I have been here for 11 months.
Good morning, I'm Julie Alzanati, and I am with Foundation Relations, and I've been here for 3 months.
I'm Laura Casey. I'm with the School of Social Work. I've been here 4 months this week also. I'm a one-man shop, so I do everything. I do fundraising, alumni affairs, and all that comes with it.
Morning, I'm Rajiv Malik, and also with the Office of Foundation Relations of Julie. We will start in February, but I've been on campus for about 15 years, previously in the international office.
Okay, great. And back here?
Good morning. I'm Julia Sullivan. I do communications for electrical and computer engineering, and I will celebrate my first anniversary on May 23rd.
Good morning. I'm probably going to be the oldest one here.
Most seasoned, perhaps, not necessarily.
Well, the development. Zach Owens, University of Illinois Athletics. I'm the Associate AD for Development. Spent 4.5 years, 4 years in the Chicago office, running our Chicago office, the Illini Center, and have now been on campus for about 11 months, I think, 10 months. So in a little bit different role here, primarily spearheading campaign planning, major gifts for our athletics.
Good morning, I'm Janine Smith with the College of Media, and I do leadership and stewardship.
Janet Cronky with Annual Giving and Alumni Relations.
I've been about 3 years.
But
With Applied Health Sciences, Annual Giving, Alumni Relations. I've been on campus since '99 with Campus Recreation, and I'm in the 15-month club, the last club. So, yeah.
Elizabeth Cook, Talent Management, Office of the Vice Chancellor for Institutional Advancement. These are some of my favorite mornings, being able to see you guys and experience this. And thank you, Gail, so much for being here. And last month I celebrated 10 years at Illinois.
Because we can't imagine that, right? I mean, we're all clapping. This is like, whoa.
Any dog years?
Yeah. I mean, 70 plus, right?
Good morning, I'm Katie Walden. I work in the advancement office out at Allison Park, and I do marketing communications, and I've been here about 2 months now.
Theo Long, Associate Director of Talent Management, and I've been in my role for about 1 year.
Carrie James, Theo told me I get to shut it down.
Oh, no. We're just getting started.
I'm with the College of Media Alumni Engagement Special Events. I've been here almost 3 years, so like 2.75 or something like that. I'm doing that. So yeah, one of my favorite mornings of the year too.
Okay, so thank you for introducing yourselves to us. Take a look around because these are people that you're going to want to collaborate with. There's a lot of talent in this room, so that's a really important thing for you to remember in your future work. We're going to do what's called the lightning round. What I'd like you to do is think of words at the moment, without having had any more conversation, that remind you of or associate with cultivation. What is cultivation? So if you, I can call on people or you can yell it out, but what is cultivation? I've got this little pad over here that I'm going to go here. Oh, this is great. Who's going to go first?
In just one word?
Yeah, one or short phrase.
Engagement.
Engagement. Okay, another one. Okay, another one. Whoop. Whoa, all right. What was the first one there? Listening. New, okay.
Emotional investment.
Ooh, that's a good one. On whose part? There you go. Time.
Digging deeper.
Digging deeper.
Continuum?
Continuum.
Research.
I didn't spell that one right. Research. We're getting there.
Growth. Growth?
Growth. Whose growth?
Our growth.
Our, meaning the development person?
Well, it just the sort of synthesis, like the symbiotic relationship between the donor and the source to it.
Okay, so there's a dynamic there.
Moves.
Say that again?
Moves.
Moves.
Patience.
Patience. Ooh. Whose part?
Yes.
Time.
Learning.
Learning. Change. It's pretty good. I missed that? Touches.
Metaphors.
We'll be actually talking a little bit about that. Touches for with, no, we don't want to say with the client, on the client, by the client, to the client. Exactly. All right, so yeah, one of the things I want you to see here is how complex this is, right? I mean, cultivation is all of these things. So how do we start to look at this process of cultivation, which fits within the cycle, and put some of these action words into play, accomplish some of the things that we've listed. So I just wanted to drive home the point that this is hard stuff in terms of segregating out what's the priority and how do we do it. There was a quote that you have on your table for this first exercise by Gary Ryan Blair, and he brought up the word self-discipline. And so that's one of the things we're going to be talking about today. It's on your exercise sheet. It's the first page, if you care. But it's a word that didn't come up here. So that's actually something we're going to be talking about. Is this idea of self-discipline when it comes to cultivation. So we've got, move on here. And you'd like to see what Case says, right? I think we covered pretty much what Case has to say. Case uses action words, building relationships, we said that, engagement, engaging the prospect, which is an important distinction here, and preparing to make the ask. By saying engaging the prospect, we've already identified this person. So cultivation is potentially happening before we've identified the prospect, but it's also something that's happening because we've identified the prospect. So it's something to think about. And then preparing to make the ask. So there's this space between identifying the prospect and preparing to make the ask, and that's where all those words happen. That's where the cultivation takes place. So we have several cycles going on here. And I actually think there are 3 cycles going on, but these are the 2 that you hear most of, and we'll talk a little bit more about it. But what's really important is that you know and understand that cultivation is part of a cycle. There's a lot of great research out here that's established this. So you've got the beginning, which is identification, and I think you've had the conversation about qualification. That was a previous one in February. We're working on cultivation now. Solicitation, stewardship, we've all seen this, right? But this is from the institutional point of view. This isn't necessarily what's going on with the donor. And the 2 aren't necessarily happening at the same time. That wheel could be spinning, ooh, this is hard to do. That spinning could be spinning at a different rate, or they're in a different place. So the first time that this person hears from you, or this company, or this whatever, they might not be in the same place you are. So you've got to join in to their cycle and start to relate and listen. And of course, don't forget us, right? Our job as fundraisers. And I like to think of them as separate. We're an integral part of the institution. I mean, that's really key, right? We wouldn't have a job. But we bring to every interaction our own filters and our own experience and our own understanding. But we're doing it within the organization. So it's really important to think about that. This is also from Case. And I wanted to pull this out because Case looks at it from the institutional point of view. It talks, this description, and I won't obviously read it word for word, but it's important to understand that institutions have reasons for being what they are and why they're an institution, and they have a process that they need to go through to be a successful one and to be sustaining. Their logistics, strategies, methods, phases, activities. How do we start to humanize those? How is it that we start to become the face of the organization to accomplish the organization's goal, but then interact with this donor or this prospect over on the other cycle? So how do we do that? It's incredibly important that we have those measurable goals that the institution has set up for us. It's very transactional, very measurable. We get evaluated on it, don't we? I mean, that's going to be part of the deal. There's no way we could raise millions of dollars without that kind of organization, without that kind of understanding. But how do we start to humanize it? So that's one of the things that I hope we can talk about, and why I think that we're separate. So we really need to understand ourselves, and we need to understand how we interact with people, but we need to do it in a professional way and understand the context within which we work. So that's a really important distinction. What's our cycle? Well, we are very much involved in the discovery and the research phase. I don't know how about what you do, but I know no matter what my task is, if I'm planning a special event or I'm going to make a personal visit, I do my research. I get on the internet, I try to find out everything there is to find out about that particular person or that particular field or that particular part of my unit. That's a really critical part. Another part is, obviously we need to validate the research. What's that? Well, kind of similar to qualification. You know, you go out and you say, is this really something that's valid? Have I learned the right thing? Do I have the right information? We all work with TED every day, and we know that TED's not always right. And sometimes we have to go in and fix TED and learn more from the internet that we might be able to learn from TED. And our job in cultivation is what? We need to listen. We need to remember. We need to assess. We need to record. We need to clarify the opportunities that are available, and the only way we're going to do that is if we understand our units and who we're reflecting. We need to provide the opportunities. We need to understand what the opportunities are. That might be program development. We might need to spend time with our unit heads to understand what it is they're looking for. The next thing we need to make sure we do is align ourselves with the organization and its goals. So we're doing a lot of that right now, right, in the campaign. We're learning about the strategic plan of the university system. We're learning about the strategic plan of our units. We're thinking very carefully about how and what opportunities are there that we could begin to share with a prospect and donor. And of course, the last thing we do in our cycle is that we want to retain the trust that we've developed with this prospect who we hope has become a donor, and then we need to provide service. It's a really important part of this, is that we can follow through once we've achieved our efforts and once we are moved into stewardship, that we can provide some sort of service back to that donor. Because, and we all know this, right? If we've done our job well, then we've accomplished the gift and we're back into the cultivation cycle. So unless we're back at the ultimate gift, and then that's the different type of stewardship, ultimate stewardship. So it's really important for us to take away this piece that within the organization, we exist, and we become the interface or the translator for the organization over to the prospect and donor. You are an important part of this process. It can't be done without you. So that's really, really important for you to remember. If it could be done without you, we probably wouldn't have jobs, right? I mean, because there'd be a machine that did it really efficiently, and it could be a great transaction. But we need to be there, and we need to be there saying the right things. So we are building relationships. We're building relationships with the organization. We have to feel good about the organization we represent, because we're not going to project what it is that we want to project to a prospect if we don't have that, right? So that's a very critical, important piece. And now we're going to talk a little bit about the realities of that research. Within each station of cultivation, there in the philanthropic cycle, can't say that too fast, there's different kinds of activities. And we talked a little bit about that. The more detail and the larger the gift expectation, usually the more challenging and involved the engagement becomes. And the other thing I'm sure you all can tell me is that there's an exception to all of these rules, right? I mean, I hope that you've had the experience where you've gone out and talked to a donor or have been at a special event and they turn around and say, yeah, I'll give you money. What can I do? That's unusual. It can happen. But there's also the one where you've worked for several years and you are told, I'm not going to give any money to the university. So there's an exception at each end. But what is it that we do to translate that research into actual cultivation and relationship building? So we need to understand that there are trends that we can predict. So one of the things that I like to do is, and I was trying to figure out the best way to graphically show a continuum in a graphic explanation of how complex cultivation can be. But we know in general that from gift size, that the smaller the gift, the less effort. I mean, that's kind of the bottom line. So you've got a transactional, less blending of donor goals and criteria. You've got perhaps a more sales approach, which could, we'll be talking about that a little bit. You don't necessarily have to have a lot of empathy for your donor or your prospect, but you're also not going to get the larger gift. And then that's kind of the way this works. We also know then if we want the larger gift, then we have to move to be more relational with that prospect. We need to be able to blend more of the organizational goals with the donor goals. We probably need to use a more empathic approach in our listening and our explanations. That, again, a kind of a rule of thumb, but I think we know that in general, smaller gift, less work. Bigger gift, more work. That's kind of what it boils down to. So at the same time that's happening, there's what we call, the cultivation timeline. It usually takes less time to get the smaller gift. Not always, and it always also takes more effort and more time to get the bigger gift. So people ask all the time, how long does cultivation take? Well, cultivation starts with the very first letter that someone gets from your organization, or maybe the very first newsletter, or maybe the very first special event that they've started or gone to. It's quite possible that you could get a gift on that first event. And sometimes it's self-motivated. People will go to the website and make a gift without us ever having contacted them because they remembered this wonderful experience they had at the University of Illinois. But it, in general, takes far more work, far much greater empathy, and far much more alignment of goals to get the larger gift. And so that takes time. And some universities are looking at, I think, 3 to 5 visits if it's a personal visit. But remember, before somebody goes to make a visit, there's a heck of a lot of work that's happening before that. So there's a special events, there's the letters that they get from the foundation, there's letters they get from your units. So all of that is still cultivation, and it's preparing potentially for that personal visit, which will get the bigger gift. So this is all part of that cycle and that process within cultivation itself. So these are an example of the kinds of activities that I'm sure you are all very familiar with. Annual fund, mailings, right? Electronic, paper. There's a call center, right? I don't know how many of you are familiar with that. I would hope that you are, but students call. If you go into TED and you look at communications, there's a tab there. You can look and see what communications your prospect has had. Sometimes I'm amazed at how many they've had, right? And I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, this person's been saturated with contacts from all these different units, all these different entities. Or I'll go in and I'll say, oh, they haven't had anything. Why is that? Well, maybe we're on a do not call list. Maybe we're coded so that they only want to hear from their unit. So that's a really important tab for you to go to and spend some time with. Also, easy peasy, annual fund, day giving, right? Giving Tuesday. It can work. Sometimes it's a great entry activity. There's also alumni events, what we call friend raising, right? You don't expect to get a lot of money from them, but it's an opportunity for you to tell your story. Kinds of activities that you'll have that take more effort, more time, and potentially give you more money are the personal one-on-one visits. Special recognitions, so alumni awards, we've just kind of gone through this process here around commencement. Senior administration. If you have a donor that you think that is close to potentially making a gift, and you think that it would be important for them to talk to somebody in the senior administration of both the foundation and the university, set it up. Get them in front of them. Make sure that it's a possibility that they can have a communication because it's important for that donor. And the way you're going to know if it's important for that donor is because you've been listening to them all along. So, for some people, that may not do the trick. There's something that I think is really important for you to determine what the best and most important method for you and for your prospect. And that is done through purposeful cultivation. And this is, to me, a really important distinction between just having an activity and making progress. The reason you have a job is to raise money for this university, right? So as much as we all are very social and we like to have fun and we love to go talk to our donors and they tell the greatest stories, if you aren't thinking about how you're going to get a gift, you're not doing your job. So the bottom line is, the purpose of cultivation is to get a gift. Now, what does that mean? Well, every encounter should provide new information to you. So if you are in the cultivation phase, every encounter that you have with that donor should tell you something, and you need to make note of that. You need to understand that, you need to put it in, because it's about your potential solicitation. When you're planning an encounter, here's the question you ask. Will I ask for a gift today? It's that simple, because believe me, when you go into cultivation phase, you don't want to go to a donor without a plan, right? I mean, you have to have an understanding of why you're going to go and meet that donor. Will I ask for a gift? If the answer is no, then you need to be able to turn it around and say, why not? Well, maybe you haven't asked the right questions. Maybe you don't have enough information on what their goals in philanthropic history or it might be. But it's really important to understand why you're not asking for a gift that day. If the answer is yes, then you're probably not in cultivation. You've just moved to solicitation. And you need to be starting to think about a proposal, whatever your unit requires. I mean, some units require different types of proposal process, and I know that there'll be a solicitation session for you later down the road. But if the answer is yes, then you should be out of cultivation. You're done. Easy said. Okay, so here's the elephant in the room, right? Avoid over-cultivation. What is that? Well, I got to have 3 appointments a day when I go to the coast. I'll call Bob because I know he'll have lunch with me. And that would be a really good opportunity to do that. How many of you have been into TED and seen 80, 100, 120 notes in your interactions, and this person has never been asked for a gift? She's like, yeah. All right. I know you've seen it. And so the question is, okay, what's going on here, right? Well, there are a lot of things that could be going on. But for the most part, sometimes there's been a change in development officers. There's been, this particular donor comes to every UIF event that's been offered. And they love the free food, and they love to talk to the chancellor. Well, I bet, who's got a story? Who can tell me an example of overcultivation? Yeah.
Zach from athletics. We have a situation that we work on with some regularity that is unique to other units, and that it's simply the Cranner, which is similar, and that there's tickets and transactions that are going on with a great deal of regularity, and there's always some degree of contribution tied to it. Cool. Mm-hmm. So we'll oftentimes, if we're going to, whether it's a big city or just going out to smaller towns, we'll go through and do what I would refer to simply as damage control or preemptive cultivation, so to speak. So some people may be upset at the other parking pass. Mm-hmm. They might be upset with how they can't get this seat or that seat. So those will oftentimes be interactions that we kind of have to undertake, and we do undertake. And we categorize it as cultivation to a large degree, because we're not asking them for anything necessarily. We're trying to answer any questions they may have. We're trying to, update people on policy and things like that. But that may happen an awful lot in our line of, in our unit, in our line of work, mm-hmm. more so than maybe other, fairly direct, major gift-focused units or colleges. So I think that's one thing that we have run into. We've also run into situations where from an inherited perspective, we've seen notes dating back to the 90s and 2000s that say, I saw John Smith and I saw him 15 times in the span of, 5 months. Okay, well, that's great, but why did you see him? What were you asking?
Right, and what were you doing?
So we try to make sure that we're staying on point with what we're doing, because we're shifting our culture
mm-hmm.
To become far more philanthropic with regards to where a campaign is being built.
Yeah.
And we've been fairly successful in that thus far with our first project, but we have a long way to go to make sure that we're constantly staying on that.
Yeah, I actually think, and I'll be interested to hear what you think, is that TED is helping us do this, actually, the way it's set up. Because a lot of what you describe are really general interactions. They're really not part of a cultivation plan or part of a prospect plan. And so if you go and look at the preformed questions for plans, and when you're setting up a plan on somebody, it'll take you through what you should be doing if you think you're going to be asking for a gift. So what used to be called cultivation is really perhaps a general interaction and really shouldn't even be part of a plan. So I think that TED is actually helping us kind of move through this idea of cultivation a little easier. Yeah, you were going to say something.
I was just going to throw out a question, and I know we've got folks like Laura and other people in the room who have had major gift officer responsibilities prior to coming here. And I know that we've got a lot of already experienced people who have been out on the road and made some visits. I want to just throw out the question, like, who has visited someone who clearly was overcultivated and not asked? Okay. How awkward is that?
So it's the worst.
Yeah.
The problem is this individual is sort of like a friend.
Uh-huh.
And this individual I've been in contact with the college for about 5 years, coming back to campus, giving lectures, but I'll get invitations to like hang out, visit the house, visit their office on campus, their dean, and having that shift, but also not to be aggressive, but then to let them understand that there's a purpose for my existence.
Right.
I love the fact that
right.
you're an Americanist and 19th century lit, because I'm into that. We can talk about Moby Dick or Barnum the Scrivener all the time. But, what it really comes down to is I'm here to
right.
make asks.
What you might do for the next round is get out your name tag. Make sure that you are, and set the appointment up for the daytime and not a lunch. You go by the office. I mean, you can start to change that culture, but it is hard. It's really hard because all of a sudden, and we're going to talk about that, maybe we should move on here.
Well, I wanted to throw out too that like with TED, disqualification is every bit as important as qualification.
Right.
Because exponentially the number of grads that we're moving into the system, like the folks who are sitting in this room 20 years from now will either hug you or want to come after you based on what you do in TED. So even if it's an easy visit and they'll have lunch with you, disqualifying will really help us and help clarify those expectations in the future.
Part of a thing to add to that, though, that I think is very important is that, remember, we're going through time. So somebody at this point in their life may need to be disqualified after a major gift at this point in time, but that doesn't mean that 5 years from now or a year and a half from now or 10 years from now, we put in another qualification plan and we start the cycle again. Yeah.
There's a notification in TED where a window will pop up and it'll say, maybe a long-term prospect, but wait 5 years.
Right, right. So that's a really important thing because this is a fluid process. Yeah.
I kind of have a question with this. We talk about people being overcultivated and seeing too much. When we kind of come into a class when, especially for maybe assistant directors or associates, we have really high visit goals. So we have to get 130, 160 visits a year, but we send out a bunch of emails, but we're going to go somewhere, we have planned for a week, we've already gone on tickets and all that stuff. We have 8 visits, we say, okay, I know this person's been seen a lot, but I know that I can get
That's right, you can fill in your visit requirement.
So where's that happy medium?
Yeah, and one of the things that I do is that I talk to my colleagues and ask if I can see somebody for them. Another thing that I do is go and talk to the alumni group who might be there. You can find out, at most large areas have some kind of alumni association, so you might be able to fill time in by going to talk to that alumni president or something like that, and put on that hat of representing the university more than just your unit. You could talk to your CAO about what she prefers you to do, but I understand that pressure. I understand that pressure firsthand, because it could be that you, for whatever reason, I have one unit that has 1,600 grads, right? So they've been contacted. I guarantee you they've been contacted. So what do I do? Well, it can be a real trick, and if you can, you try to make a shorter trip. One of the things that we do too is, and now we're really getting into personal visits for some of you who aren't in this part of the cultivation, but part of it is that if you do your research, maybe you really just go for a couple days and you look at an anchor visit. You make sure that one that's ready for an ask, or that one, that you build it around that anchor visit. And so we can talk more about that, and I would imagine that everybody has some advice they might be able to give you for that, so that's good. I want to throw this slide in here because what's the difference between a salesperson and a development officer? What is that? Is it something we need to think about? And I just wanted to put out some of the qualities because there are some similarities. So what's the difference? When we're stuck in this potentially over cultivation phase, or we're in this cultivation phase and we're trying to find out about somebody and whether they want to give us a gift, this is tricky stuff. And there are some things that we want to make sure that we are accomplishing. And one is that we don't have a product, do we? I mean, most of it is goodwill. We have goodwill to sell. We have that warm, fuzzy feeling of doing something good for our students or whatever it is for your unit. So when we look at the qualities of a salesperson, I see a lot of similarities between them and between us. Who doesn't agree with conscientiousness? I mean, that's really important. Being respectful, that's key. Being initiator, that's an important thing, and that's a sales job. Persistent, calculator, that's an interesting word. I don't know, does that fit for a development officer? Maybe, maybe not. Coachable, that's why we're here, right? So we are all coachable, and hopefully we're here to learn. Passionate, I would imagine that if you are successful in your job, you are passionate about what you're doing. So with the salesperson, right? Although who's met that salesperson who's over passionate, right? Who just like won't go away. You want to be that person? Think about that carefully. Then that word overachiever is part of this. So I think that's interesting because I didn't see overachiever being used to describe the development officer. Although I have a feeling there's some competition in this room. I know that for a fact, actually. But the qualities for a development officer, good communicator, right? Because remember, you're the translator. You're the translator for your unit or the university and to the donor. Strategic. That means you must plan before you go. You really know what you're going to say to every visit or what's going to be printed in every newsletter or what's printed in every letter that you're sending out to someone or what is the purpose of your event. And that requires this idea to meta-think. I want you to really think about stepping back from you as the person, you as the university, and look down as if you're watching all these transactions. That's the only way you're going to be strategic, is to start to think meta-cognitively about what you're doing and why you're doing it. And that is what makes it purposeful cultivation. So this is one of my favorite slides because it's so colorful. Okay. So here's what I think. I think that we can break it into quadrants. And I think that if you've ever done any of those, the psychology tests that we all do for leadership, these quadrants work together. So there's transactional and relational. We're going to get into that and talk more about that. There's trust and like. That's an interesting question to talk about. But I'll tell you over here on the left, transactional, right? It's something that a machine can do. When you go and you put your card into the ATM, you expect cash. And if you don't get the cash, in other words, you trust that machine to give you the cash. If it doesn't give you the cash, you're really pissed off, right? I mean, you just don't, you go find whoever it is that you're going to deal with. All right, so then there's the other side of it. That's the most extreme, right? That's the most extreme transactional thing that I could come up with. On the other side, you got best friends forever. All right, so this is that person that's totally relational, that is, and see how my voice is changing? Because but here's the question. This is heavy like. So if you look at the circle, on the outer side of the circle is where things get a little hairy for everything. You don't want to be Mr. or Ms. Trustworthy completely and not have any of relational skills or like skills. Same with transactional. You don't want to be only relational. You don't want to only be likable. The sweet spot's in the middle. The sweet spot is where all of these things start to come together and you can be that person within the framework of your job and your occupation of what you're doing here and move forward. So that's to me what sweet spot is, and that's why you have sweet spots candy on your tables, because those are pretty good and you get paper in your mouth while you eat them. But Yeah, best friend forever. Is that a good thing for you to be as a development officer, as you're representing this organization? No, please don't do that. And that's what happens when you over-cultivate, right? All of a sudden, you're good friends. And that doesn't mean you have to be nasty, right? You got to find the sweet spot and understand what that is. So we're going to take a few minutes now and do an exercise. And we're already running late, of course, but that's how these things work. I'm really excited that we have so many of you here today. I've got 2 different scenarios on your teamwork page, number 2. And we're going to divide the room in half. Well, maybe we can do it by tables. We'll do it by tables. Find a partner. And we don't really have enough time to do both, but we're go ahead and randomly pick somebody at your table and choose either number 1 or number 2. Yeah, just choose one. And it doesn't matter to me which one you choose. Okay. How many of you have experienced either one of these 2 situations personally on a visit? Has anyone actually ever had this happen? Okay. Just 1 or so. Okay. What I'd like is to know who has done what. So who did part 1? How many of you worked on part 1? Okay, and then how many worked on part 2? Oh, it's a pretty good split. Okay. I need to have a volunteer team for, and maybe even 2, we'll see how it goes, to do part 1. So who did work on part 1? And you're going to come up here and you're going to read your scripts. So that way you'll be on the camera. So don't all volunteer at once, right? Okay, so who did part 1? I see a lot of this. No. Would it be better if you did it at the table and not up here? Would be more exciting. Okay, all right, here we go. So if you could stand up, you and your partner, did you 3 work together? Or yeah, okay, there you go. I like that creativity. The 3 of you go ahead and stand up and tell us what your part is. You can set the scene however you want to do it. I don't know, we don't. You're going to have to use your loud voices, I think, because I don't. Does this mic work here? Can
It does, yeah,
Does it?
it does.
Okay. So, and that's actually already on. There you go. So if you can be rock stars if you want. So tell us who you are and introduce your little script.
All right, I'm going to preface this by saying we didn't get all the way through the script, so it'll probably be a little bit of winging it, but nonetheless. So I am Megan Fundraiser. Maybe you should think of a more masculine name here, but at any rate, so I'm going to just act like I'm in the role that I'm in here at the university, representing the biology focus areas, and then I'll let Ross introduce himself.
Thank you. I am Mary Williams, but we're going to switch it to Matt.
Dr. Williams.
Yeah, Dr. Williams. And I'm a biology major at U of I.
All right, so thank you once again, Dr. Williams, for taking some time to meet with me today. I appreciate it. I know you're busy, and just wanted to introduce myself and share some updates from the university.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Yeah, so from what I hear, you're a big Illini sports fan. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm excited that we got a new basketball coach in. I think the program's going to do really well. Yeah?
Yeah. That's exciting to hear. Yeah. Have you had an opportunity to come out to any university games in recent history?
So I came a couple years ago. I haven't seen the State Farm Center when it's been fully renovated, but I was here a couple years back, and it was a good time.
Oh yeah, good to hear. Yeah, and the stadium actually is beautiful. There's a lot of new spaces there, and plenty of ways for you to kind of rediscover the stadium. So I think a trip in the near future is certainly worthwhile for you.
Yeah, I think so. It'd be great to come back.
All right, okay, good. And you've also been a part of a few other events on campus recently.
Yeah, I came back for Foundation Weekend a couple years ago, and hoping to come back soon. I'm actually retiring at the end of this year. I'm a biology teacher, high school biology teacher.
Congratulations. That's some amazing news to hear that you're retiring. What do you have planned in your retirement?
I'm going to travel around the world, go around the country, see some family, maybe come back to U of I if I can find some time as well.
Okay, good. Circling back a bit, you mentioned being at Foundation Weekend. Can you explain what that was about?
I mean, I got to meet some leadership from around campus and around the foundation, and heard a little bit about what the priorities are for fundraising. And I contribute a little bit each year, and I know it's not a whole lot, but hopefully now that I'm retired, I'll have some more time to be able to contribute my time, whether through volunteering with the department or other ways as well.
Absolutely, and we certainly recognize and appreciate your contributions to the university. Every dollar counts, especially in today's economy. So thank you, and you're certainly helping to uphold the university's mission. With that in mind, I did want to check with you today and see, have you mentioned having additional time and resources in your retirement. Have you considered a greater gift to the university program?
I've thought a little bit about it. I don't really know what my options are, but I know that I care about students.
Great, okay. So you care about students, you have a biology focus. I would like to, if you wouldn't mind, come back to you in a few weeks with a proposal to consider a gift to the biology department to support student scholarships, if that's something that you feel that you're passionate about.
Yeah, that sounds great.
All right. I like these kind of visits, that would be nice.
All right. Well, that was interesting, wasn't it? Yeah, that was a one meeting. That was great stuff. All right, who took number 2? Who's got number 2? Nobody. All right, you two. Theo and Elizabeth. This will be good. Let me give you the mic. Oh, winging it. Oh, okay. Actually, sometimes family members can be a really pivotal part of the process.
So okay. So Katie and Theo are the donor. It's Katie. It is Katie, not Katie. Okay. Yeah. So Katie and Theo are the donors. You're alumni Mary times 2. All right. So yeah. So I. Dushan. Okay. All right. So we know obviously from the setup that that the two of you and so nice to see you again. I know that I really appreciate the opportunity to have spent some time with both of you before, and I know in our prior visits. That first of all, thank you so much for your support of Illinois, and we just celebrated commencement, so I know that student achievement is really important to you both, and so commencement a very nice time to share that, and in fact, I know it's a little bit harder for you to sometimes to get back to campus, although that you would like to. So I actually sent you an email right before we got here and shared with you Nick Offerman's commencement remarks, as well as some different video stories about students. So I hope you guys have time to take a look at that. I can.
Age discrimination.
I can show you how to do that. Okay. Oh, you're welcome. So
this is an example of not planning for the visit.
So based on your interest in, again, and I know that you've shared with me how much you are close to the community college that you support, and that's really terrific. And I know that one of the things that we talked about in past visits is that 20% of our students at Illinois are first in family to attend. And so today, kind of based on some things that I know that you care about, I did want to ask you for your increased support of students, and I've brought a couple of different scenarios. There's a bridge program that we would love for you to support, as well as I know we've talked about the Illinois Promise program that provides support for students who are first generation. But kind of tell me where you guys are.
Well, we appreciate you coming to visit with us and spend some time. And yeah, while we haven't been back to the university, we'd love to see some information on the Bridge program. We're big supporters of our local community college, but we'd be interested to hear about how we can maybe impact people who are interested in coming to the university who might be first generation college students who can't afford to do so. So what information do you have to show us?
Well, I have a lot of information. and in addition to that, too, I know that we've also talked about how you might want to structure that gift. So I also have some information that you asked me to prepare about planned giving, and then a combination. I know that seeing the impact of your gift is very important to you. So I'm really excited today to be able to share with you some ways that you might be able to see that impact very quickly, as well as also looking at structuring a gift in the longer term.
Yeah, that's fine. That's good. Thank you. Does anybody else want to try number 1 for us? We'll try. Maybe you have time for one more script. Anybody else do number 1? No? Okay. Oh, did I miss one? Oh.
No, I don't want to do it. I just want to say. We had some additional questions. I mean, it was not.
Sure.
We talked about, since in the scenario it says that we, as a development officer, don't know much about the team. We thought it might be, they did a good job of saying, have you been back to the center? Have you seen the renovation? We thought it might be good, since she hasn't been visited in 5 years, to almost re-qualify her in terms of, asking about what's her relationship with the team. Why is she so into Illinois basketball? Kind of getting her to talk about that, and then also maybe just a little update on where she is in her life. So, does she have kids in school? What's her family situation? Because we just think in that 5 years, a lot could have changed. And since her giving went from, $3,000 to $100, there may have been a life change in there too. So just adding some more questions about her love of Illinois basketball, but also just kind of getting a better sense of where she is personally. And also,
Didn't say. Maybe that's a question that needs to be asked.
I think we suspect we know, but we don't know for sure.
Yeah, there are a lot of questions in that one. I agree. Yeah.
No, we have the second one.
All right. Okay.
So we went into the strategy phase, being an engineer and the marketing and communication background person people. We thought for the second person, it might help to actually have some information about how tuition has kind of increased a little bit, what level of support an estate gift could help, or a combination gift could help. We really thought if the person, since the person has been visited 3 times, if they're an information person, you give them more data about scholarship amounts and what that could do. But if they're a visual person or someone who has not visited campus in a while, perhaps just take out a phone and take pictures of the building and just show them different spots to keep doing a little bit of personal touch. And then $10,000 is a lot of money that's been given over time. Perhaps talk about what that legacy is going to look like. If you've been giving $1,000 per year, hey, do you want to continue doing that for perpetuity and do more? And if they were a graduate student, $250K is a perfect amount for a graduate fellowship. Talk about that. Maybe talk about a relationship with a faculty member that they might have. So depending on the person, having visited them 3 times, you can get a lot of information that you can go with.
That person has, you're almost at the end of cultivation with that person, right? Because you already know most of the information. You came up with still a few more questions that you need to ask, but you're very close to suggesting to them, may I bring you a proposal to sort of put together the things that we've talked about. That's very different. Actually, you guys went a little fast, but but that's okay if that works. What you have to be careful about, especially with that first visit with somebody who hasn't been seen for a while, is that you don't presume that you know everything there is to know about them. So you really want to put yourself in a position where you're asking questions, because things might have changed. Their circumstances might have changed. And if it's somebody who really likes basketball, make sure you learn a little bit about the team. That's a useful thing. And then kind of steer them around to maybe your units and what they're doing. But so anyway, I think that that's an interesting way to start to assess all of this information and put it together. I wanted to talk to you about relationships. All right, so here's the transactional and relational question, right? Because you remember the ATM machine and my best friend. Transactional, professional, self-interest, what you get, stay in touch, understand the process, judge the results, win conflict, agreement, evaluate the results, And then over with relational, what are the qualities of a relational situation? Personal. I've got to find my notes. Okay. Mutual interest. What you give. Keep informed. Understand the person in the process. So you can kind of see these are on one side, on your left side, you've got understand the process, relational, understand the person in the process. Evaluate the relationship. So judge the results, evaluate the relationship. Win conflict, resolve conflict. Agreement and acceptance. Evaluate the results. Evaluate how the other feels about the results. So there are different qualities to the transactional versus the relational. And it's a really important distinction to make because remember, we said that the larger the gift, the more involved and the more relational you'll need to be with that donor because you are touching something that's more passionate for them, and you're going to need to understand what that passion is. I want you to think, too, about business and about sales and development. I like this quote. If people like you, they'll listen to you, but if they trust you, they'll do business with you. So what do we do to build trust? And the question is, you might like somebody a lot, but is that the person you want to have draw up your will or your mortgage or something? Probably not. You want to make sure that it's somebody that you trust their skills. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. So the question is, okay, what's the difference between trustworthy and likable? And so again, I will just get all these up here at the same time. Uh-oh. It went away. Huh. Why did that happen? This is why he's sitting here. Did I push a button? Oh,
Yeah, there you go.
Got it. Never mind, thank you. Pushed too many at once. Okay, so up here now you've got the idea of between likable and trustworthy. Well, actually, we like both people, right? I mean, we want people to trust us. We want to be likable. What is that person? When we put on this name tag and we go out and represent the university, who are we and what are we trying to build in that role? So I think it's important that we understand both of these qualities and what makes them different. And then remember the quadrants, the 4 quadrants. The closer we can have to the center of the circle and have parts of each of the quadrants of trustworthy, of transactional, of relational, and of likability, the better off we're going to be in how we relate to people. So in trustworthy, we like authenticity. In likability, there's a vulnerability. That's an interesting comparison. In trusting somebody, we act with consistency, and we seek agreement when we're working with someone as a friend and being likable. With trustworthiness, we have integrity, and in likability, we have the power of touch, which I thought was a really interesting combination. Should you touch your prospect? I don't know. I mean, now not literally necessarily, but we do use the word touches. And so that's a personal word. How many of you in an office situation would reach across the desk and touch a prospect? Probably not. How many of you would be at a special event and come up to a prospect and tap them on the shoulder or her on the shoulder? So you need to think about how you use your power of touch, when it's appropriate, and how it reflects on what you're trying to accomplish in terms of establishing and building the relationship and engaging with the individual. Show compassion and laugh at themselves. Now, a little bit of laughter in a meeting can go a long way, especially if it's a stressful meeting. And if you can show some of that vulnerability that is up here at the top of the list by laughing at yourself, that can open up an opportunity to talk to somebody. I make mistakes all the time, and I do laugh at myself a lot because I can't believe it. But like right now, I laugh a little bit. I don't know. Sometimes that can work. Sometimes it can't. But again, a lot of it will depend on the environment that you're in with this person and prospect. So, resourceful, great with names. How many of you can remember everybody's name? I saw some amazing statistics when you were doing the quiz with Theo's at the beginning there. How many of you remember people's names when you meet them? What can you do to remember people's names? If you're not good with names, how do you remember it the next time? I put people's names on my phone. I put people's names on a piece of paper that I'm keeping for myself. That's another tip, by the way. Don't take any of your TED reports or anything like that into a visit. It's not what you want to do. The last thing you want to do is have that show up and fall out on the desk or something like that. But try to be good with the names. Do you have to remember everybody's name to be trustworthy? I don't know. Connectors. People who are trustworthy are connectors. People who are likable never name drop. Think about that. And where do you find the balance in that? People who are trustworthy are humble. People who are likable always say less. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. People who are trustworthy are available, and people who are likable are always happy to see you and meet you. So there are definitely some parallels, and there are some differences. So what we need to do as individuals, find your comfort zone. Where do they overlap? What's going to help you do and commit purposeful cultivation? I'm going to skip the next exercise because we're having too much fun here. I'm going to dive a little deeper into the personal visit. Yeah, it's magic. I think of Elizabeth's comments about magic. Okay. First of all, with the beginning of a personal visit, and for those of you who aren't doing frontline fundraising where you're actually going on visits, this is important for you to understand too, because most likely you are integrating into the process through special events, through communication, and through potentially annual fund giving through letters and that sort of thing. Some of you are doing stewardship. This is definitely relevant to stewardship. So one of the things that is most important is to remember that qualification's over. If the person's been qualified and you are setting up and have a plan set up, it is important to recognize that that's done. You don't need to ask those questions anymore. And if you do, that means qualification isn't over. It is time to cultivate the relationship. So that's a really important reason to go on a visit if they've already been qualified. Learn your institution's fundraising priorities. The last thing you want to do is go in and not have the answer to a very basic question. Now, it's okay not to have the answer to every question, and in fact, strategically, you can use not having the answer to a question for another touch or another contact. Done that? I think you've probably all done that. But you can use it strategically too. So think about that. It's great to be able to send somebody an email with a link afterwards, or to be able to share a document, a sample, a potential a fund agreement sample or something like that. But if you don't have the basic answers to the questions about your units, make sure that you find a way to either memorize them or have them on a fact sheet that you can leave behind or something like that. So that's key in terms of planning your visits. You need to be empathic. There is a level of empathy. You need to be able to put yourself in that donor's shoes. They need to know that you are listening to them, and we're going to talk a little more about empathy in a minute. You also need to learn what their goals are. Remember the cycles? The perfect world is if all of the cycles are going in the same rhythm, and that you are meeting them at cultivation at the same time they're doing their research and investigation about what kinds of charities or organizations to fund. But you might not be coming into their life at that moment. Maybe they've just made a huge decision to give a major gift to another organization, and you're coming in and you want to cultivate them. You need to understand that because they're probably not ready to make another major gift decision. They might be. So that's the question you have to find out about and you have to ask about. Because what we start to do is get on the same cycle so that we're in the same place. And then be professional. And hopefully we've talked a little bit about how to do that for yourself as an individual and how you relate to the organization that you're serving. So the focus on the donor relationship, number one there, we just talked already a little bit about the qualification process. One of the things I do, read all the notes, even if there are 80 of them. Go back to number one in TED. Find out how they were first contacted. Look at the communications that they've had. Some of them get 4, 5, 6 emails a month. I have asked donors, do you want this many emails? I know I probably shouldn't do that, but I do, because that's one way that I can show some empathy. Personally, I hate getting all these emails, and I have a junk email list, and I know that. And so I sometimes talk with donors about that. Do you feel like you're getting enough email? Are you getting enough communication from the university? Believe me, that will open something up. They'll either say, oh yeah, I love it. I love getting all these emails and learning. Or, oh my God, I get too many emails from you guys. You need to lay off. Oh, well, we have a code for that. We can code you so that you don't have that. And oh, really? Yeah. I said, but then be careful, because if we code you not to get anything from us, you won't get anything from us. We're very literal about that, because I've also gone into a donor and have them say, I haven't heard from you guys in years. Oh, really? We send out email, blah, blah. You go back in and you see, oh yeah, they coded they didn't want to hear from us on some night when a college student from the call center called them while they were having a birthday party with their child, and they go, get me off your list, I don't want to be on your list. So that's one reason why maybe they haven't heard from you, is that they're on a permanent do not call list. So you can investigate that. That's a question that you can ask. So we also want to make sure that if you don't have enough information, you can go back to a gift officer that's already seen them, if they're around, and you can ask about that. If you made the qualification visit, all right, that happens to me a lot. I'll go see somebody for the first time, and then I've finished qualification, and it's like, oh, I want to go ahead and start cultivating this person. How do I switch gears? Because in qualification, frequently it's like an alum visit, and you go, and you're not planning to ask for money. You're trying to learn about who they are, and you want to understand. You know, you look around the apartment. Should I be taking photos with my phone and see what kind of cool stuff they have? No, don't do that. Qualification visits are very subtle. But if you are doing qualification, all of a sudden you go to cultivation. How do you make the switch? How does the donor or prospect know that you're now there for a different reason? And so you have to have a strategy for that. And frequently when I've gone to qualification visits, say, well, how'd you find me? Right? Have you ever had anybody ask you that question? How'd you find me? It's like, well, there is the internet. But I always say something about how we keep alumni records. At that point, I'm certainly not going to be asking this person for a gift. So I'm the same person going back for cultivation. How do I do that? How do I come from being that person's best friend, or potentially a fellow alum or whatever, to a person who wants to explore the idea of them giving a gift? So you have to think about what we've already talked about, transactional and relational and so on and so forth. What's the best way that you're going to support that next step? And you have to stop qualifying them. At some point, you really do start the cultivation process. And so the next one. Oops, oh, I did it again. Focus on the donor relationship. Learn your institution's fundraising goals and opportunities. This is really basic. If you don't have this, then you need to really get busy and start working. Because you need to know what is your priorities in your units, in your college, and you need to be able to share that. And if you don't have that information, like I said, have a leave behind. I've created fact sheets sometimes because I can't remember all the facts like you all do. And you know, I make sure that I have all the information. Understand what your fundraising goals are for your unit, and understand what that might take to raise. And so when you're talking to somebody in cultivation or back to qualification, get a sense of what their capacity might be. I have found that research is wrong. You know, sometimes you go and you find out, oh, they have a second house. Oh, they have a yacht. Oh, they travel to Napa for 3 months out of every year. It's like, oh, this is a different kind of person than what research is telling me. So those are all questions that you can ask while you're cultivating this person. Make sure you look for collaborations and talk to each other, because sometimes that is the best answer. So the next thing we're going to do is talk about empathy. And I think that that's something that can be a little tough to get your arms around. And so I have a video to share with you. How many of you have heard about emotional intelligence? Yeah, good. Because we're in the people business, so I hope you've thought about that. And the author of the most popular book, Emotional Intelligence, is Dan Goleman, and I've got a video to show you for him. And he's talking here with Bill George, who is also a master of self-improvement. Let's see if I can get this pulled up. I have to do another...
Bill, there's another kind of focus that I'm really interested in your thoughts on. I call it other focus on the person you're with, on the people around you. And of course, leadership depends on being able to tune into people, talk to them in a way they understand, motivate them, influence them, listen to them. There are three kinds of empathy. There's cognitive empathy. Cognitive empathy means understanding how the other person thinks, the terms in which they perceive the world, what their mental models are. Understanding that can make you a very powerful communicator, because you know how to put things so people understand. The second kind is emotional empathy. And this involves actually different circuitry in the brain that helps us resonate. We feel in ourselves what the other person is feeling. And it creates a sense of resonance, of chemistry, of rapport. And the third kind is what's called empathic concern. This draws on still different brain circuitry. It's the same circuitry that activates when we care for our children. It means that you not only understand how the person feels or how they think, but you care about it. It matters to you. And you communicate that. You give someone the sense, like your own children, I understand you, I empathize with you, I care for you, I'll support you. In the business realm, I have your back. And there's an argument that leaders should manifest this too, that's the kind of boss everybody wants to have.
Yes.
So I'm interested in your thoughts on those three kinds of tuning into the other person and how they matter for leadership.
Well, I must say, first of all, I'm a latecomer to empathy. I've always had empathy, but I've been a latecomer in communicating that sense of empathy, because my language didn't always reflect that. And so it was only mid-career that I learned that I wasn't coming across that way. I was more in a sell or tell mode than I was a real in-depth and one-on-one better than in groups historically. So how do we convey this empathy? I think by listening to other people talk honestly with us and learning about non-judgmental feedback and expressing through body language and support and other mechanisms, we learn this. And that's why I think a small group can be so important, a one-to-one, in-depth relationship with a mentor. I think people ought to be mentors and be mentored, because I think everything is a two-way street. And we learn empathy for the other person's situation. Empathy in some ways is close to compassion, and I would say you have to have some compassion or empathy for oneself. That's why you have to start there before you can be truly empathetic to others. Because otherwise it's a feigned empathy, it's an artificial thing, it's not genuine. And over time people will see through that. So I think to be genuinely empathetic, one has to be feeling good about oneself, but really walk in the other person's shoes. So the first thing I teach is, can you walk in this person's shoes? Can you really realize what they've gone through? But then I need to know more about you. Tell me your situation. Don't just tell me the problem. Don't state the problem you're trying to solve. Tell me what goes into that and how you feel about it. And asking people how they feel, I think, is an essential element of expressing
But
empathy.
don't you think you have to ask in a way where the person feels you actually care what the answer is?
Yes. And if you're just going through the rote questioning, they'll see right through that.
Because there's authenticity with yourself, but then there's authenticity with other people.
Yeah, because I'm learning from you. I mentor a lot of younger people, and I say, I'm going to learn more from you than you're going to learn from me. They don't really believe you, but I am, because I'm learning about their life circumstance and their perspective on life. And, you know, they're younger than I am, and it's a different generation, and I think I really understand them. The different forms of empathy.
That in the leadership world, empathy has been confused with cognitive empathy alone.
Yeah.
That the other kinds of empathy, which you know, the neuroscience world, the cognitive science world knows is really important, haven't been well understood, and nor has their function and importance for leadership.
Okay, I have a comment I want to add on, okay?
Yeah, please.
I think expressing genuine empathy for someone's circumstance and being able to walk in their shoes is an essential quality of all leaders.
Yeah.
But many leaders see this as the soft side of leadership. Scholars call it the soft side. The hard side is making the numbers. Dan, let me just say, I've been in business for 30 years. I'm a teaching business for another 10. This is the hard side. It's easy to get the numbers right. I know how to get the numbers right. But really having the empathy for people and really being with them is hard. This is hard work for most of us as leaders, but it's the key element.
What do you do, what do you say to people who argue, well, I can't have empathy for my employees because I have to make hard decisions about them?
I say that the hard decision comes easier when I have empathy. Dan, unfortunately, your job is going away. We just can't afford to have as many people here, and I will do whatever I can to help you find a place where you really fit. Or, you know, this job has outgrown you, to be honest, but there are many places. You have great skills. I think they'd be happier in a smaller company.
So in other words, you're presenting even the bad news with empathy.
Yes, you have to. Yeah, you can't just say, here's your pink slip.
Yeah. I like what you said about compassion. Mm-hmm. Compassion is a word that rarely goes with leadership, you know, in the business world, but empathic concern is the basis of compassion. If you care about someone and they're in need or they're suffering, or you can do something for them, it's compassionate to do that. That's compassionate action. So you could say that leadership itself should embody compassion in that sense of caring about the people you lead, helping them out. I think even coaching someone or mentoring them is a compassionate act, although that language isn't used.
Oh, it is very definitely a compassionate act, and I think everyone should do it. And I think people should mentor younger people, and they should mentor older people, and you should let people mentor you who are younger, not just older. But I believe mentoring is a compassionate act, but I don't think you can be truly compassionate for someone else until you have some self-compassion, until you feel good about yourself, feel good in your skin. It's hard to walk in another person's skin until you feel good in yours.
It's interesting to me that in English, the word compassion implies compassion for other people. In other languages, compassion means for yourself as well as for others. And it's part of a learning curve that I think is taken care of in the kind of groups that you're talking about.
Well, this is why you've had to add the word self-compassion, and some people think that's egotistical. I don't see it that way at all. I think it's the starting point for being a genuinely compassionate. Otherwise, you're feigning it. You're feigning compassion.
Why don't we take, like, 5-7 minutes or so, and we'll wrap it up when we get back. I've got some good tips for you, so you have to come back. And we'll have, I hope, a chance to hear stories from each other. So, well, welcome back. There's one thing that we've all noticed, and that's that people who are in this business don't have any problem talking to each other. So it's a wonderful thing. A lot of good energy in the room. Thank you for that. Okay, so we're going to kind of wrap this up a little bit, but I wanted to continue to drive home this focus on the donor relationship. So I hope you appreciated that video on empathy. I found that it was really helpful. It's translatable to what we do, I think, very much so. And Dan Goleman has, like I say, written a book on emotional intelligence. So if you want to do some more personal work, I'd recommend that you read his work, and you can find a lot of it on YouTube as well. So interesting stuff. Might help and give you some more tools in your box when you go out to talk to a prospect. So I guess we're still loud because of the video. I hope it's not too loud. Learn your prospects' fundraising goals and needs. So that's a big piece of what you're supposed to do when you go out. So again, I can't emphasize how important it is to read TED. Read every note you can. Talk to people who might know this person. Learn what you can about that person through the internet, etc. Contact UIF Research. They're not here today, but they will work for you. They will not only find your top 25 prospects in any given area, but they'll find out information for you. One of the major gifts that I worked on, they did what we call a deep dive, and I mean, we found out things you'd never imagine that you could find out about somebody on the internet. So these things are really, really important to do, and make sure that you listen to the answers that people give you, because that's another tool in the box. And one thing I really want to talk about is I statements. We've all grown up in this generation of self-expression, and how it's important that we don't overrun somebody, so we say I this, I that, because people can't argue with you about it because it's the way you feel about it. This is not a time for I statements. Cultivation is not a time to talk about yourself or about what you feel. It's not the time to talk about your family life or your children or what you had for lunch. When you go on a cultivation visit, your job is about the prospect. And now, I say all that, but sometimes you're on an interview. I don't know how many of you have had that experience, but I've been on calls where I get asked lots of questions. And so, yeah, sure, you're going to share, but always turn it around. And if somebody says, well, do you have a family? Are you married? Do you have children? Which comes up. People want to know me and know about me. I'll say, yes, and how about you? Turn it back around. And then say, well, blah, blah, blah. Okay. And so then you start to find something you can build on in the conversation with them. But this is not the time to talk about your bad day, that you've just, your hotel, you waited forever to get in your room, and then there was a problem with it. This is not that time. Make sure that you do not use the I statement. So once you start to say the word I, think twice. What am I really going to say here? So think carefully. Again, do the metacognitive thing, self-aware, step out. Oh, okay, this isn't about me. So really, really think a lot about that. The other thing that, in terms of tips and trying to keep track of your different goals and fundraising needs for a particular prospect, is that on these trips, when you're out and you've done 18 visits, oh my gosh, you're not going to remember it all, believe me. And so the minute you get out to your car, or the minute you have an opportunity to get into your phone, which you should not be doing during a cultivation visit. Phones, no, put them away. Enter your notes. I keep a pad because I'm still a handwriter, so I keep a pad in my briefcase. Get out to the car. Usually there's sometimes there isn't. And I write down, I just brain dump. It doesn't have to be a beautiful piece that you're going to put into TED later, but just kids, names, where they go, how long they've been at XYZ job, et cetera, et cetera. Build your cultivation notes, and you'll be really glad that you did when you go back that night to the hotel, or heaven forbid, like I have, 4 or 5 days later, you get back to the office, like, oh my God, I didn't do my notes. There they are. So you can start to refer to those and have accurate notes and remember, because when you've done a lot of people, I don't know about you, but all the hotel rooms start to look the same, and the parking garages all start to look the same, and so do the people. So you have to make sure that you're really paying attention and write those notes down immediately. So there you go. Focus on the donor. The sweet spot. The sweet spot is there. It's a moving target sometimes. because of the people that you're interacting with, right? But all of these factors, plus more, feed into this process of cultivation. So if everything's going well and your cycles are all working together and you're relating to this person and they're responding to you, you found the sweet spot. And it isn't always easy to find, but hopefully if you try some of these things and develop a sense of self-awareness, understand what your purpose is, understand that it's about them and not about you, you put all this stuff together in a transactional but yet likable way, you're probably finding the sweet spot and an opportunity then to go ahead and move to the proposal side, which is the solicitation piece. So when's cultivation over? Well, there are some of us who say it's never over, right? Because you're going to continue to cultivate somebody and understand who they are even as you go into the proposal process. But there is a moment. There's a moment. And so you understand that cultivation is over when you know everything you need to know in order to make the proposal. And so, I mean, you have a sense of it. And one of the big tips is like, what can I do to help? How many of you have heard that from the prospect? What can I do to help? Well, ding, 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 right? I mean, it means that they're probably ready to hear something that you can suggest. So is it a gift? Maybe. Let's hope. Is it, gosh, would you be willing to hire an intern for us? I mean, that would be fantastic. We really need interns. I mean, start, you know, when you're at the end of cultivation, hopefully you're already thinking about what you might be proposing to this person because you've gathered all that information. When you are able to say, can I put together a proposal for you, and you feel comfortable with that, and they say yes, cultivation's over. That's that moment, right? When it's time for you really to start putting together. And in fact, if you don't respond with that and you call back a month later and want to go to lunch, they're going to be very confused about what just, you know, what have we been doing? What just happened? And the other thing to recall is that if you're asking, this is the major gift world now, but if you're asking somebody for a major gift, they've been asked before. They know this dance. So if you don't follow through on your job, having finished cultivation and moved into solicitation, you're like, what's going on? Why don't I have the answer to this question? It does happen that you get to the point in cultivation where someone will say to you, right now, my focus is on providing for my great-grandchildren. That happened to me a few weeks ago, by the way. And I'm like, oh, whoa, okay. So it was kind of a surprise. But my focus is on, what was the key word there? Right now, exactly. So what I've just heard is that he's not ready for this proposal in this particular case. But he didn't say never. He didn't say no. He just said right now. So I obviously have more work to do, right? I need to figure out and understand what does right now mean. And so, no, he's not ready for that proposal yet. So that's the kind of thing that you listen for. And people will tell you no. And if they say no, then take it seriously. If they really say no, don't go back and continue to cultivate them. Put them in the plan that no gift at this time. You know, make sure you make the notes. And it could be that later when you're not a gift officer or you've moved on or whatever, somebody else may be able to take it up with them. But anything short of the above means that you probably haven't asked any questions enough, that you haven't learned enough. And it also can mean that you've missed the cues and you've cultivated for the wrong reasons. So if you thought you were done with cultivation and you thought that you were ready for a proposal and it's not there, then you really aren't done. So I think that's an important differential to make, is that you need to understand where you are in the process. Again, step out of it, look at it, see who you are and what you're doing. I do have one more exercise. I've actually skipped one, but this one I think will be a good one. Because I want you to look on your table, there's exercise 4. I want you to do some introspective things for a moment. I want you to take this time and think about what we've talked about today as if you were on a cultivation visit. What have you learned? What do you need to write down that you're going to remember and reflect on the interaction that you've just had? And so write those notes down as if you've been on a visit, and then identify your next steps. So what do you have to do to move forward in becoming the best development officer you can be, the best communicator you can be? Think about that. You've got about 5 minutes to do that. And I will ask if anybody wants to share, but it's not it can be personal. You don't have to share. Still a lot of writing going on. Good. I, obviously continue to think about this as your day goes on and see what you can take away that might help you become a better development officer. Anybody want to share? You don't have to, but if you had some insight that you'd like to share with somebody, please feel free.
So I'm a communicator, and so of course I'm doing some of those mass communications that become touches, but I also work with our MGO to write those proposals. And so one of the things I thought about is that of course we start from the standard proposal template, but how much more could I do to get the specific interaction notes in that proposal so that some of that is out of my MGO's hands. So that was one of the things, that how important those specifics are. Also, the thing that really stuck out for me, and again, not as an MGO, but knowing really clearly where those benchmarks of when you're going into this phase and when you're coming out of this phase. That was really helpful. It was the first time I've heard that. So.
Any other insights people want to share?
One thing that I kept thinking about throughout all of this was a piece of advice that I received from a coworker when I first started doing individual asks. And he had said to me that when somebody tells you no to a proposal or an ask, it's not personal. But when they say yes, it is personal. So he said that really gives you an idea of if you're timing it out correctly through cultivation, that it's gotten to the point where you do have a strong enough relationship that they're willing to say yes. He said in most cases, you have to realize that when they say no, there's not that level of trust yet that you've spoken so much about.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I hope that people will remember that too. My personal experience is that if you've hit the sweet spot, you almost don't even have to ask. It's a natural outcome. It's the next step in the relationship is to provide the support. That just gave me goosebumps when I think about it. I mean, it's just so cool, right? When that happens, it's like, oh, yeah, what can I do? Well, I've got this great program, and, oh, we could really use $250,000 to endow it. This would be fantastic. Oh, yeah, that'd be great. I mean, that's what you're looking for, obviously, right? Doesn't happen all the time, but that can be a really, really cool thing. But it's about the opportunity. So people say, how can you ask for money? I said, well, I don't really ask for money very often. I provide opportunities and link people with opportunities. And they're like, oh, because I mean, I don't see it as a negative, and I can't get away from the sales piece. Okay, so a few things I've noticed. Prospects. And so we're not talking about donors yet, we're talking about prospects. Prospects sometimes think of giving as giving something up. So you've got to really think about that. How do you, when you're cultivating someone, how is that something you can start to address? And I really think there are examples of things that you can say to people, and your behavior can identify some of that challenge. There's just, maybe some of you have an example of that. I know that I've had people say, oh, I just, I want to prepare something, again, for my great-grandchild, or I had a gentleman tell me he was going to buy a car. And so it's like, well, sometimes your enthusiasm can win them over in general, but other times you can say, well, maybe this isn't the right time. Depending on what the situation is, you can respond because you've listened and you're not thinking of yourself, you're thinking of them. Remember, you put all this together. Sometimes you can come up with a way to respond when they react that way. I think that sometimes prospects think that small gifts aren't important. I've had people say, well, and that goes to the next line too, people don't understand their wealth and very frequently. And so I've had people tell me, well, I don't have anything to give. But yet $25,000 is a huge deal for us. It's not for that person. So part of it is understanding their capacity and understanding what, you can usually get a sense of that when you're in the room. So part of it is understanding through your research what the capacity of that individual is and how you plan to talk with them. But I have had people tell me that they are not wealthy and they're comparing themselves to people who are wealthier than they are. So that's a tricky one to get around, and you can indeed do that. And you can talk about what a remarkable difference even a gift of $25,000 can do. That can endow a scholarship in perpetuity or something like that. So there are ways to talk around that one. The other thing I already mentioned to you is that when you hit the sweet spot, it's a natural, the ask is natural. It's just a natural outcome. Cultivation's never over, and wealth is relative. So that's really important to understand when you're talking to people of wealth. Pitfalls. There's a really long list. So I'm not going to read all these to you, but I do want to point out some highlights. And that's, again, this cultivation is not about you. It's about the prospect. And so stay away from the I statements. Don't start out your day and your conversation with I. Start out with a question when you're meeting with somebody. How are you today? Now, you can say, I think it's good to see you, but why would you say that, right? So you say, it's really good to see you. You don't have to put the I in there. Watch out for over-cultivation. That is a trap that you can get into. In fact, I would suggest for those of you who are on the road and meeting and doing personal visits, and even those of you who are working on communications, go in and really identify people who've been over-cultivated and see how you might be able to come up with a plan to address that. So take a look at that, because you may have some asks that are just really ready to happen, and no one's really looked at it that way before. Plan every visit. Don't get to a visit or don't put together a communications piece that's not to the market group or that isn't addressing, don't go in and talk to somebody at the level they're not ready to be talked with. So that's really, really important. Personalize as much as you can. I mean, we know that that's what makes us different than the ATM machine. We can, in fact, we shouldn't be all transactional, right? So we have to make sure that we really are trying hard to understand that donor, be empathic to where they are, and meet them where they are. Meet the donor where they are. And then there's the trap. How many of you have been in that situation where the person wants you to try something that they've made to eat, and you're like, oh God, I don't eat meat, or oh God, so how do you start to address some of these personal situations, or the really old guy who wants to drive you somewhere? How many of you have been in that role, right? I mean, I call these the traps, right? Because you can really get trapped in some of these things, and it becomes uncomfortable. Again, that's when the name tag can help, right? Because you're a professional, you say, well, I have another meeting after this, and I have to take my own car and say goodbye to you at the restaurant. Or, there are ways that you can start to get around these things. I actually have had and set a timer when I'm on my home phone, because that happens, because, oh, my cookies are coming out. I gotta go. You get off the phone because you've talked to this person way too long. So you start to think of ways that you can extradite yourself from the trap, because that can be a real problem. Or someone who won't stop talking. Now, that's your job. Your job is to listen, but you want to direct the conversation, right? So you want to make sure that you're getting the answers to the questions you need instead of, something superfluous. So have some ideas about how to stay away from the trap. Then that's really, and I think, 11:16. I had till 11:15. So, but I do, if there are some stories you want to share, some pitfalls that you've experienced, anything that you'd like to share, I'd love to hear those, and we all can learn from that. Yeah.
I just wanted to say, just prefacing my point, this was an amazing session. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're
for
welcome.
that.
Good, thank you.
You're welcome. And, but you had talked about not looking at your cell phones, and one of the things you also mentioned, and I love the details of when you're wearing your name tag. Another really great tool is a watch. So you can glance down and check the time. You're not taking out your phone, and also that can be a great sort of fulcrum to get out of that visit.
A cue,
If
that's
you're
right.
in a trap, I'm so sorry, but I've got to get on the road, get to my next appointment. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, those are, you can enter a visit and say, I've got a hard stop at 11. I'm really sorry. I'm so glad you've taken the time to meet me today. And we didn't even talk about meeting somebody at their office. Billable hours are huge. If somebody is giving you a half hour, that's a big deal.
I meet
So
with clinicians, I mean, that's who I meet with their appointments, is their income. So
Yeah.
I know I'm a non-income.
right.
appointment.
If they've chosen to talk to you, that right there is huge, right? That's 80% of the call. I mean, you're almost at solicitation when you've done that. So that's really, really important, is to understand the environment you're going into. It can be harder when you're going to a retiree's home and they have nothing else to do for the rest of the day. So that's when you've got to have a way to get out. And you can say, oh, I have another appointment. It's 20 minutes away. Be direct, because you're there for a reason. You're not their best friend, right? So that's a big part of it. You got a story?
I was just saying I have a 7:30 meeting at someone's home this week.
Oh, those nighttime meetings. There's no end. And maybe you have some ideas about that. I love breakfast meetings. People have places to go, especially you're working with somebody who has a job, right? Those work out great. Coffee, always good. Lunch can be okay. I really like lunches. The work of a lunch happens in the last 7 minutes, right? I mean, that's when they know why you come, you have a great conversation, you eat, and then you can get down to it, and time to go, and everybody goes off. I love lunches. Late afternoons are okay, but they expect drinking. So you have to really think about that, right? Is that something you want to do? If you're on the road and you're traveling, you got to really think hard about that. And dinners, they're scary. They can be really bad. But there are tips. Anybody have tips for him about what happens when you go to a dinner?
Trent, I used to work with a guy who had an imaginary dog.
Oh.
So like at evening meetings, he'd be like, I'm so sorry, my wife's on the road, our dog's been home all day, I gotta get going.
There you go. Now you have to start thinking about this, because you don't want to slide in the slippery salesperson act, right? So, but I agree, crutches are very helpful. There's probably a way you can do that, yeah.
The other about drinking, because then sometimes like it's inferred judgment and that kind of thing about alcohol. People don't want to drink alone. And again, wanting to avoid the slippery salesperson. But one thing that a very seasoned major gift officer told me was that being on antibiotics for a sinus infection, so I'm finishing up antibiotics. I would really love to join you with a glass of wine, but just got to be really careful. Give that person permission to drink, because you said, I drink. Right. And so totally fine. I really wish I could, but then you don't have to. Again, like when it,
Right. Well, you don't have to talk about antibiotics if you're not on antibiotics. You can just say, I can't drink tonight. I can't join you. That's fine. I mean, no, unless and if actually they want to know why, then you guys are already in the wrong place, right? So you've gone over to personal and relational. If you start talking to them about your whatever, you're not there for work. And again, you got to play this one out. We've all been to those relationships that are really worth. You want to be their friend, right? That can be a challenge. Any other tips? Tips for visits, tips for communications, yeah.
I have more of a question. So I work in alumni engagement, so I actually probably see more over-cultivated people. And they're at the point where they've been cultivated so much that they're almost insulted if somebody wants to ask them for a gift. So I'm wondering if any of you have any tips on making that switch. And I think some of the people I work with, they really do feel that their time is their gift.
Oh yeah.
And
volunteers.
So how can you, I don't know if anybody has any thoughts on that, how to sort of gently switch over.
Well, sometimes you don't be so gentle, I think. right? You put on your tag and you say, I'm a major gift officer. So, but yeah.
Or even if I'm trying to sort of refer to a major gift officer,
Mhm.
or sort of like, no, like I just want to talk to you,
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. So that's tricky, yeah.
So what I do is I try to get meta with it. And so per the story I told earlier, the guy who's a long-standing relationship, comes back to campus with some frequency. I say, relatively speaking, my job is great, and I share with people a multitude of ways that they can help, and there's a lot of ways to get there. We talk a lot of times about annual gifts and flexing that philanthropic muscle and building it towards possibly a major gift or a legacy gift, and I get paid to do this, and I get, to visit with wonderful people like yourself.
Yep.
And by stepping out of my
Yep.
role and looking at it from 30,000 feet, that sort of diffused the situation, and he had to then address that point, and he said, we're just not capable of doing anything beyond our time. And actually now I'm at this point where I'm sort of in a holding period, but I'm still planning on going back and possibly having coffee to discuss a legacy or something, so that there still is an opportunity. But I'm very much backing away from that, hyper friend.
That's a great way of doing it. So that's something you could think of, or in your situation where you're probably seeing them at events and that sort of thing, or so you might be able to say, I'd love to refer you to one of our gift officers, and go from there. I mean, you wouldn't have to say major gift. I mean, I not knowing the situation, but you can always refer someone to another professional, and that establishes your role in the process.
Yeah, and that tends to be where the pushback comes, is when they've told enough to me that I think that they are ready for that, and then it's like, oh no, I just want to work in this space, which I think.
Well, then that's maybe your answer, right? Right. So that might be the qualification. This person's loyal. They love the University of Illinois. They think whatever X, Y, Z, but they're not ready for a gift at this time. And so that that in TED, that's an option. You can do that. And so then maybe in a few years, after they've had this wonderful experience for all the work that they're doing with you, they may reflect back. I don't know. Are they older people or?
And that's the hope.
Yeah. Yeah. Age makes a big difference too. I mean, whether people are establishing their legacies or not, or where they are, whether they've retired, their financial situation, all that, it plays into this. So.
One thing just add, we see this a lot in athletics, is that we have a lot of folks who head up our Illini clubs or other groups in cities outside of Champaign that think that their investment of their time, sort of being the representative of athletics in their given city, is their gift back. And so we sort of, yes, and thank you for your time and everything, but for them to really work as true advocates of our cause, then they need to also be invested, because they're trying to bring in other folks to support the annual fund or an LEG or major gift. If they're not also invested, then that pitch essentially doesn't mean too much. So even at a smaller level, just getting involved so they have a little bit of skin in the game just helps substantiate their claim to bring others involved.
Yeah, that is the key right there. And we didn't really even talk about advisory boards or any of that today. And actually, I didn't say to you that I would suggest that you all become donors to your unit. Put some skin in the game, and understand what a donor expects. So put yourself in the donor role. And again, it doesn't have to be a big gift. So there's envelopes on your table. You can know. But we need your support today. So really consider doing that, because it's really hard to go ask somebody for money if you haven't done it for your own unit. So.
Something to think about, even if they're a volunteer, most volunteer groups usually have a component of expectation of giving, especially our alumni board. Like, we expect them to give either $100 or $5,000 or whatever they can afford. Something that we've kind of thought about is asking them for that level of support for perpetuity. Like, say if they're giving $1,000 every year, hey, like, do you want to continue to give that $1,000 to the trust fund, which is our unrestricted fund, for a while? Maybe having that major gift conversation and seeing that kind of legacy. They might not have an affiliation like, I want a scholarship in my father's name or this faculty member's name. We have someone who's like, no, I just want to give to the trust fund. Like, I'm trying to close a gift, which is his endowment will support our unrestricted fund, because he's been giving $1,000 every year. He's wonderful. Like, I'm going to give you $25,000 or $50,000, and that's going to be my thing. And maybe moving that conversation towards, what does your annual support mean for lifetime?
We have an alumni board scholarship. Specific.
And then after do they pay on a yearly basis, and then they put it into the trust after they're off the board?
That's a major adoption question.
Oh,
I don't know. She's not here.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I just know that that's where the board president will funnel that support that way. So that this is our legacy.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And it could be that person for a major gift wouldn't have any interest in a scholarship or supporting a faculty position or whatever, but would give to that fund. And that is what you're listening for. When you go on those cultivation visits, that's what you're listening for. Where is their interest? How can I align my cycle with theirs? So, I think you've got some information you want to share?
Yep, thank you, Gail.
Oh, you're welcome.